Hey everybody, my name is Lloyd Hancock and I'm here today with our Pastor Freddy T. And today we're just going to be answering some questions that a lot of people have had so far. So Freddy T, if we could just begin, you can tell us, how did Real Life Sango come to be? What brought it about?
Yeah, man, that's a great question, Lloyd. And hello to you that are watching. It's a great joy to tell you the story of Real Life Sango because it's an incredible story. Lloyd, you've gotten to hear this a few times, I think, but many months ago, there were 4 pastors that just through their friendship together, they began to talk and pray about their common burden to see a new church planted in the Sango neighborhood. And so as they began to talk and pray, they began to take some steps toward that. And so they began to invite some guys to talk about possibly being the church planter, to plant a new church in Sango. And so after going through about 2 guys, nothing developed.
Right.
And then one of those pastors, Larry Riley, the pastors' names are Larry Riley, David Royalty, Willie Lyle, and Chris Royalty. And it was a solid group, Lloyd, solid group. And Larry Riley invited me to come and meet with these pastors, just to hear their heart and their burden to see a new church planted in Sango. So I was pastoring in Arizona at the time, and loving it. Arizona is a beautiful place.
We were in beautiful Clarksville, though, right?
That might be debatable. Scottsdale's where we were living. It's a resort town. But September of 2017, I flew in actually by myself from Phoenix into Nashville. And I got up really early one morning, and I drove from the St. Bethlehem area all the way out to Carmel Elementary School, which is where we are right now. And as I drove all the way out here to Carmel, I drove through all these neighborhoods that did not exist 15 years ago, even 10 years ago here in Clarksville. But what I didn't anticipate is that as I drove through these neighborhoods, the kids were out waiting for the school bus with their parents, just pockets. Right. So I knew I was going to see new homes, but I didn't know I was going to get to see the people that were living in those homes. And as I drove through those neighborhoods, God began to stir my heart with compassion and began to remind me that there's a great harvest. There's many people without hope and without the life that Jesus offers right here in Montgomery County. And so later that morning, I had the privilege of meeting with these men that had been praying about their common burden to see a church planted in Sango. And they just kind of all went around the table and shared their heart. And Lloyd, almost immediately, I had a sense that God was going to call us and lead us to plant this church. We didn't have a name at the time. I was living in Scottsdale. We didn't know all that God had in front of us, other than just kind of that still small voice to my heart as these men prayed and shared. The Lord was saying, "This is your next assignment." And I, as I prayed that day, tears welled up in my eyes because it's a big deal, And I grew up in Clarksville, and so in a very real sense, this was kind of coming home. We had been church planters in New York City, and had been pastoring in Scottsdale for 3.5 years after that. And so we said yes to the Lord, and the rest is history, So we moved here in December, and huge faith when you move to a brand new place to plant a church. There's a lot of things that aren't guaranteed, and so you're on your knees with your eyes on Jesus saying, "Lord, you've got to provide." And God has provided every step of the way, everything that we needed. What's been so amazing about this story is the local church's support. So I told you about these 4 pastors. Well, kind of as soon as we said yes, other pastors began to get on board and say, "We want to be a part of supporting that." And so my buddy Larry at Hilldale, he said, "I want to be a part of that." And then a buddy across town said, "Hey, we've got a parsonage that when you move, your family can move into temporarily." And so support. I just feel like I've had a front row seat at seeing God pave the way for this brand new church planted in Sango. And so to kind of fast forward, our launch date is coming up. You may be watching this video after our launch date, but our launch date is coming up September 9th. We're super excited about that. It's going to be right here in Carmel Elementary School, and the people of Carmel Elementary School are legendary. They're amazing, and we love them, and they're just so hospitable. And they themselves are a lighthouse for this community. This is an extraordinary school. We're grateful to be partnered with them in meeting here. Lloyd, a little more of the story. When we moved in December, and in January we began to gather a core team. I think we met you late December, maybe.
Yep.
So it's kind of cool. You were like one of the very first to jump on board with this vision of a new church. And thank you for taking a risk, brother.
Hey, it's worked out so far.
And so we began to gather a core team and cast vision for this plant. And all these other local churches said, hey, come preach in our churches, cast vision, and we'll send people with you. And so our vision was to gather a large core team and to equip that core team to think and to live like missionaries. So that my family wasn't the only family living on mission to plant a new church, but rather we had dozens of families saying, hey, we want to live and think like missionaries to plant this church. And Real Life Sango is the name. And about March, we began to meet on Sunday nights for core team meetings, where we began to sow DNA into the hearts of the core team. And almost every week, I'd get an email from somebody or a text from somebody saying, hey, we want to hear more. And so I've just been meeting with people over coffee and hearing their hearts and hearing what God's done in their hearts and the burden that God has given them. And it's beautiful, because when God is doing something, He weaves the story through lots of different people's hearts. And that's what we've seen. This is God's story. I feel like I just have a front row seat of seeing God unfold His story here. And the guy behind the camera today is Elijah Guzman. And Elijah just came into the story recently, but it was perfect timing for what God was doing in his heart. He's our worship leader here at Real Life Sango. And anyways, Lloyd, the story is just beginning. But even in its first chapter, it has been a beautiful story of kingdom unity, a local coalition of churches and pastors saying, we want to unite together. We don't want to be territorial. We want to lean in together and see a brand new church planted in an area where we need it. And, oftentimes we don't think about the South as a place where we need new churches. But we'll talk a little more about why church planting, later. But we are thrilled, and we hope everybody leans in and gets to experience some of the joy of Real Life Sango.